Steph, welcome to our inaugural Employer Brandwagon 15-minute fireside chat. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to have a chat to you today.
So for everybody listening, this is the lovely Steph Calvert from CGI, and she's an EB specialist with sort of hats also in talent acquisition and D&I, which will be, I think, a bit of a topic here about having many hats and doing lots and, you know, all part of our really EB 360 theme, so it fits in perfectly. So we've just had International Women's Day, which is an epic day in the calendar, and it's so great to see all the tractions it's got, you know, over the last few years. However, we kind of understand that there's a lot of noise out there, a lot of talk, a lot of celebration, which is epic. But now and then you just want to step back and think, okay, this is brilliant, and we know that issues and the problems we've had to date. But what Steph's going to share with us today is some super sort of tactical and tangible examples of what you've actually been implementing at CGI, right? So it's kind of more than just noise, how employer brand can really help drive a truly gender inclusive culture.
Yeah, that's the plan.
So for today, we are obviously focusing on sort of the female gender skew. I think, you know, to be clear, rather than just gender inclusive. However, and if anyone who's seen my post recently for International Women's Day, a lot of these, I think, actions and initiatives can be applied to any kind of inclusive culture. And one thing that's dear to mine and Steph's heart is actually the culture piece, that within an organization, you can have great initiatives, you can have great programs, or you can have great initiatives and programs that look good on paper. But ultimately, if you don't have the culture that underpins it, you're really set up for failure, which is what we want to sort of explore today, to make sure you can actually create things that and programs that actually you can deliver on, and really showcase the impact of employer branding in that space. So before we jump in, Steph, I just wanted to sort of reiterate why it's important. We all know the historical issues and what hasn't happened, but why it's important. And for those of you that know me, I love data. Business success. So according to McKinsey, companies that have more gender diversity within the business are 21% more likely to experience above average profitability. Take that back to the business. As we look at the world of remote, hybrid work, collaboration is becoming increasingly difficult and super hard to remain connected. And researchers concluded that groups with more women in it are actually better at taking turns in a conversation, which in turn helps them to share knowledge and skills between each other. So collaboration becomes so much easier, especially in this sort of remote hybrid world. And then the piece that's obviously dear to all our hearts, it broadens the talent pool, both internally and externally, if you have programs in place that empower and support women. Enough from me. Obviously, we want to hear from Steph. So firstly, Steph, could you sort of give us a brief overview, actually, who CGI is as a business?
Yeah, sure. So we are a global IT and business consulting firm. 80,000 employees globally. So if you're listening... Sorry,
80 or 18?
80.
I thought I'd double down on that for people.
80,000. So if you're sat listening to this outside of Australia, you very well may have heard of CGI. Here in Australia, we're only 300 employees, so quite small in comparison to offices around the globe, which obviously results in a small local team. And as we touched on before, us all wearing multiple hats as well. So
300 in Australia with 80,000 people globally. Right. So I'm assuming, as you just said, you don't have a huge team. You potentially don't have a huge budget or resources. So could you take us through some examples of initiatives that you have implemented to help drive gender inclusivity? And I think also the really key piece is, what were the results?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing we do is just review, what do you actually have now, using internal surveys, external surveys, and focus groups. And then that just helped us really prioritise what we needed to do and where we could add the most impact. So to drive gender inclusivity, we were all in agreement that we needed to have a big focus on attraction. I'm going to give you the results first. So we were 20% of new hires back in financial year 2020, and we managed to increase that to 26% in F21. So we are, we're going in the right direction.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah, so really pleased with the results that we've had over the last year. As you said, most of what we've done has really been on very, very minimal budget and resources. So I wanted to talk you through some of the things that you can do for either for free or for not a lot of money. I think most people these days are familiar with a gender decoder. If you pop it into Google, there's a free one available, Cat Map Field, I believe it's called, but just pop it into Google. Lots of people are using those for adverts and have been doing for a couple of years. But we went one step further and we started to run all of our recruitment marketing material through that. So recruitment brochure, career site, any copy really, doesn't have to be used exclusively for adverts. Completely free to do, doesn't take up too much time either. And once you start to use it, you get more comfortable with, the words that are more gender neutral or will, attract more females. We also really prioritised stories from our female members as well. So using our female members as employee advocates and making sure that those stories were authentic with real personal examples. That was a big part of our drive, was to really add that authenticity into our brand. We did a massive review of the interview process, so looking at the structure and the way that was set up. Some of the things that we implemented was every single interview now is prepared. The questions are prepared in advance. So if you're interviewing for the same job, you're going to be asked the same questions. And all of those questions are based on the selection criteria. So there's nothing else snuck in there to try and put you off on the day or anything like that. Another big piece of the interview process is we used to have, I think like most companies, you'd conduct the interview, you'd all get together after the interview to, have a chat how the candidate performed. And it was when I actually witnessed this, with my, first hand with my own eyes, for an internal interview where we had, some senior and some mid-level management on the interview panel. And I could see them changing their opinion on the candidate, like, as the more dominant personalities spoke through their thoughts on this particular employee, and I could you could just see this, and I was like, oh, this must be the same for all of our internal and external interviews. So what we've done now is when you complete the interview feedback, you send that off before that discussion. Or in a lot of cases, the discussion actually doesn't happen anymore, but it just removes that opportunity for conformity bias.
Yes, I love this. Well, I hate that it happens, but I love that you've done something about this. This is amazing.
It's just about identifying it and putting a stop to it, really, calling it out. So there are a couple of things on the attraction side. Can't have attraction, obviously no point in having all these attraction pieces without focusing on the retention piece as well. So one big thing that we did, again, didn't cost us anything. We reviewed all for like roles in the business between our male and female employees and made sure that they were paid the same. So if you're in the same location doing the same role, you get the same pay. And we've now built that into our annual salary review process. Probably one of the biggest things that we've done where we've seen the most value is become a Work 180 endorsed employer. So if you're not familiar with Work 180, jump on their website. They're in Australia, the UK and the US now. We initially joined them to amplify our message, so to actually get out with them, get our message out to that female audience. But probably one of the biggest benefits I've seen of joining the Work 180 and partnering with them is the knowledge sharing. So being an endorsed employer means that you get all this extra information from other endorsed employers, what's best practice around gender inclusivity, and great ideas then for implementing in your own business.
I love this so much. I think the gender parity, the pay parity, I love the fact that you've addressed it. And I think it's important, but kind of we know that needs to happen. What I love is the fact that you've seen the difference. And you're saying for people listening is to go back and say, this does make a difference. But the two things here for me is the gender decoder actually for all your copy, because I think people think about using it, whether it's Textio, is it Textio? I think it is, or, those kind of tools. But I think generally people think of it from a job description perspective, but I love that you've run all your content through it. I think that's a great call. And I also don't think you should underplay changing or restructuring your interview process with that example, because I think that's incredibly important that the business step back and listen to you. So if we talk about the impact of employer brand and what you can have is the fact that you turned around and said, this is not correct, this is how it should be. And the fact that you've had to change it to, as you said, conformity bias and even unconscious bias when people are brainstorming is one of the biggest issues we're facing. So I think the fact that you've been able to go back to the business and say, we have to change this is extraordinarily powerful.
Yeah, and it's really paid off as well.
That's amazing. What would you say is the sort of the barriers of entry or growth for females generally currently?
I think the biggest thing is the availability of part-time work, and this is especially in the tech sector. So if you jumped on LinkedIn and put in, developer role in Sydney, you'd at the moment, especially, you'd get hundreds and hundreds of roles come up. If you change your search to part-time, there's practically nothing out there. Now we've got a lot of part-time workers in the business, but we very, very rarely actually advertised for new part-time positions. So one thing we just implemented in our process was every time we open a new requisition, can this role be done part-time? Really, really simple, but really effective. We ended up with, I think, about a 20% increase in our part-time positions, bearing in mind we were coming from pretty much zero. So it's been a big improvement over the last 12 months.
And I would imagine then you partnered with HR and TA on some of these initiatives. Do you think they had really was there a clear demarcation between their different drivers to the success of this and changing your processes?
I think because we're one team, this has really helped us. So we have one overall people strategy. We all want to attract and hire more females. HR probably have that slightly closer lens on retention and engagement.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's the main difference. But I think everyone is in agreement that you can't create a diverse workforce through hiring and then not change anything internally. You need it to be an inclusive workforce. Making sure that when you actually get your female hires through the door, that you're delivering on what you've promised. And then my role in employer branding is just making sure that all marries up. So whatever you're saying externally is what's really happening internally, and your policies, processes, benefits are all in place to support that gender inclusiveness as well.
That's what I really wanted to hear, don't you, Steph? And I think, doubling down on that again, it's all very well putting people into the business, but who are the current females you have within the business that you could also help, and, with these different types of roles, etc. So I think that's super, super important. What have you seen go wrong?
For us, it's been our metrics. So we've not been able to measure some of these results properly. We know that we've made massive improvements. So because we hear this from the business, from all of our employees, our leadership team, the survey feedback that we receive. We've hired more people, more women into the business as well. But we don't have the detail to show true ROI, so increasing number of applications, how candidates are progressing through the interview process. So that's something that I look back on and go, I wish we would have actually had that in place, 12, 24 months ago.
Well, that's epic learning for you to share with everyone listening so they cannot make that mistake up front. So thank you for that share. Lastly, but super important, what's next on the D&I agenda for you?
Unsurprisingly, metrics. we've got some improvements coming to our ATS, so we can actually track that properly. And because we've seen these changes in the interview process work so well, we want to do more work around that space. Do some training with all of our interviewers to give them the skills to be able to better interview candidates from a more diverse background. It works both ways. We want to make sure that any candidate coming to CGI can have the opportunity to shine during that interview process.
Yeah, amazing. I love it. Thank you so much, Steph. This is super important, and I love the fact that it's super tactical. These are absolutely initiatives that people can implement, I think, and use an example of how it actually does move the needle. And I think that's the important thing. I think our role as employer branding specialists is actually to have those conversations with different parts of the business and truly make an impact.
Yeah.
Can't wait to chat to you again soon. Thank you so much, Steph.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, Elle.